Now, obviously, looking at the landscape, we have a 9.3% unemployment rate. We have a lot of people hurting. We have people, as we mentioned, upside down in their mortgages who feel they can't move. Or we also have foreclosures of people who have fallen behind in their mortgage payments. Those factors, how long will this take to, first of all, what's the effect of this for the real estate market, especially in certain neighborhoods? And how long will this take to sort of gain a certain degree of equilibrium again?
You know, if we go back and we look at the last time we had a long cycle, that cycle lasted about 9 years from the time we had a peak to a trough and got back to the same prices we had in nominal terms. And so that's why I suggested a few minutes ago that we probably will not see the kinds of prices we saw in 2005 for at least another 3 or 4 years. And what's keeping that from happening are several factors. One, obviously, we still have a lot of people in trouble. Number two, we still have foreclosures and auctions. And number three, you know, we just have worries in general about where the economy is going to go. Nonetheless, and maybe this is because I'm just getting older, I'm thinking about 3 years out, 4 years out, 5 years out, and I start to worry that unless we plan now, in order to be able to have the kind of housing stock we're going to need to keep attracting young people who we're desperately going to need, we need them to take jobs, we need them to pay taxes. We are going to have to worry very soon again, are we going to have places to build homes in Greater Boston, throughout Massachusetts? Are developers going to be able to find land at reasonable price? And that's why I worry, for example, that we may repeal 40B, which will take a lot of communities out of the market. 40B was passed in, what, the late 60s? 69. And what it basically said to communities who were putting up real restrictions on zoning or building codes, which kept developers out of the market, was that if you don't have at least 10% of your housing stock affordable under HUD standards, a developer who tries, first of all, to go to the local community to build, can go to the state, get a comprehensive permit, and often has been able to build housing. There's a movement, in fact, there's a ballot referendum to repeal 40B this fall. If it passes, I worry very much that many communities will no longer be places where we can put up housing. It will be a very serious problem, and people are going to be kind of making a very bad economic decision if we repeal it. Because one of the things that we know from the studies we've done at our center and elsewhere is that unless we have housing stock that can attract young people into the state, we're going to see businesses not settling here. We'll begin to see another Massachusetts cycle, as we've seen before. We'll lose population, we'll lose business, and in fact, in the end, we'll actually see another crash in the housing market. So actually keeping 40B may be the best way for people to keep the value of their homes.
Kevin.
I'd like to make a comment on that about 40B. Unfortunately, sometimes people think negatively when you hear the term affordable housing. So let's change that term to workforce housing. What we're seeing is that the teachers, the firefighters, the police officers can't afford to live in the communities that they work. And so what this does is it offers them the opportunity to be able to live in their community, make where they have their job their home. And so there's a strength to 40B in the fact that we get to keep these folks that are an integral part of the community to stay there.
There are a number of developers who are developing smart housing, either condominiums, townhouses near urban areas, downtown areas, near train stations and bus stations. Do we see that developing across the state to try to keep working people in their community in which they grew up, which is a real challenge in this state for many communities? Have you seen that, Kevin?
Well, let me tell you what we've done, and maybe Kevin, you can pick up on it, or Tony, John. In addition to 40B, in 2005, we wrote a new law. I'm proud to say I was one of the co-authors of it, called Chapter 40R. And the idea was that we could understand that some communities were worried about having housing where there'd be an affordable component, 20–25% affordable. We said, okay, maybe you do face some issues here. So why don't we say, we'll give you some incentives. You do right by putting an overlay zoning district where denser housing near transit can be built, and the state will give you some added state aid, up to $600,000 simply for passing a 40R district, and then $3,000 for every time a housing permit is pulled. And by the way, if you're worried that young families will move in with children who will attend your public schools and put strain on your public schools, if in fact the additional property taxes don't cover at least half of the additional cost of schools, the state under 40S, another law I'm pleased to say I helped write, we will have the state pick up the surplus there. So we now have 31 communities, I think, Kevin, who have passed 40R. There are 10,000 units of as-of-right housing that could be built there. There's already some building going up, I think, on the South Shore on 40R communities. As the economy recovers, as that housing demand picks up, we're going to see a lot of housing in those 40R communities. The cost to the state is minuscule. But the fact is those communities have done the right thing, are going to get very good housing stock, and it's also going to make it possible to have the working family housing that Kevin talks about.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, do you want to add to that, or?
Barry was great to lead off and answer that. As the economy recovers, we will see more building. It has been very slow, as Barry mentioned. And there's another factor as well, and you talk about being close to public transportation. What's going to happen to the oil prices will impact gasoline prices, and there will be an attractive feature to living close to the commuter rail. And
nationally, home construction was down, 17% last month, but here in the Northeast, it was down by a much smaller percentage, around 8%. But the home construction people are hoping and seeing that that can rebound by the end of the summer. I did want to open the floor to questions. We have Carrie and John out here with microphones. If you want to raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. And if you have questions, and that's the whole point of these business breakfasts, is that we can engage you and engage our panel in questions that affect you directly. And we will ask questions and go to the audience just as soon as we have a question over here. And I think we have one in this corner too. Carrie and John are getting to you as soon as, keep your hand up and they'll find you, and we'll be with you in just a moment. Tony, did you want to add to that about affordability and how we are reacting to making a wide range of homes available in this economy?
Well, I mean, some of it you can just see by what's happened to median prices in the state of Massachusetts. And, you know, although we're certainly more affordable than we were, in terms of metro areas in the United States, there are only 3 other metro areas that have had a smaller peak to trough than we have had here in Massachusetts. In fact, there are only 5 that are under 15% in the entire country. So that although there's clearly more affordability, that band of change in price is actually pretty small compared to other cities. In addition, from the flip side of that is that an assumption that housing is not tax positive. And of course, it really depends on what kind of housing and what those values are relative to the community in which the housing is being built. And you know, most towns are based, their tax base is primarily housing. So the fact that towns collect tax revenue and then can pay the bills says that housing actually is tax positive, and in many cases can be gigantically tax positive. Now, we're probably an extreme example where almost 90% of the revenue that we pay to the town of Plymouth goes right to the bottom line, but sort of a myth a bit about housing being a tax loser.
Sure. Let's go right to the question. We have a question way in the back here. Yes. Your name, sir?
My name is Joe, and my question is, Massachusetts is a very expensive place to live. Housing, education, medical costs. That as the demographics change and the population ages, what is the likelihood that the people are going to leave Massachusetts entirely to Florida, for example, to get away from the weather and the high cost of living, which would again create excess housing here with the smaller family size?
I mean, our experience is exactly the opposite, that people will want to stay where their families are, most particularly where their kids and grandkids are, and that the number of people who are making a choice to leave the state is getting smaller, not larger, and that people are choosing, in fact, a big part of our market are people who are coming back, who left at one point in time and have decided that those values are the ones that they cherish the most, and being together is more important than some of the other choices.
I might add that we follow those numbers very closely, and indeed, this was happening. The out-migration was very strong as prices soared, home prices soared, so that by 2005, 2006, we were losing between 60 and 70,000 people a year who were leaving the state. People had been living here, moving out, versus people moving in. Last year, for the first time, that went positive. That is, we didn't have loss, we actually had some gains. Part of it was we did become a little bit more affordable. Part of it is people aren't moving as much because there aren't jobs and other places to go. And then there's global warming. I mean, I am very worried about global warming, but when it's 172 degrees in Florida, Boston's going to be an awfully nice place in the winter.
It's going to be nice and cool here. You know, I could back that up. My brother Rick lived outside of D.C. for 31 years. He now lives in Worcester. He purchased a house there, and he's very, very happy in that city. His two sons, one lived on the West Coast, another lived in West Virginia, have now both moved back to Massachusetts. And they're all coming back home. It's very interesting how the home fires are very attractive as you get a little bit older in your life.